3 days before Christmas, I was sitting in my small, drafty apartment, wrapped in a blanket, when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a group text from my mother, Sarah. I picked it up, expecting a reminder about what dish to bring to the family gala. Instead, the message was cold, direct, and final. We have agreed. It is better if you do not come to the gala this year. Nicholas is uncomfortable with your attitude. Seconds later, a notification popped up. My sister Mara had hearted the message. I stared at the screen, waiting for the hurt to hit me, waiting for the tears to sting my eyes. But they didn't come. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just felt a strange, cold clarity settle over me. I typed one reply. Perfect. You will not see me again either. Then I looked up at Julian, who was sitting across from me, watching me with that quiet intensity of his. He nodded once. It begins. Before I tell you what I did next and how I turned their perfect Christmas into a nightmare they cannot wake up from, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I set the phone down on the worn coffee table, the message still glowing on the screen. Julian leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes locked on mine. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell me family is everything. He didn't tell me to be the bigger person. He just said 2 words, his voice low and steady. It is time. I looked at him, really looked at him. To my family, Julian was just the quiet guy who drove an old sedan and never had much to say at dinners. They saw a nobody. I saw the man who had held me while I shook from nightmares about Nicholas. I saw the man who had quietly, methodically helped me build a fortress around my life while they were busy trying to tear it down. I stood up, the blanket falling away. I walked to the closet and pulled out the garment bag I had hidden in the back 3 months ago. I didn't reach for the travel bag. I wasn't packing to leave town. I was dressing for war. I pulled out the dress. It was sharp, professional, a deep emerald green that made me look like I owned the room, not like I was apologizing for being in it. Julian went to the bedroom and came out wearing a suit that looked deceptively simple, but I knew better. It was tailored perfectly, the fabric dark and expensive. He put on his glasses, the ones he only wore when he was working on a deal, and suddenly the quiet boyfriend was gone. In his place was someone dangerous. We didn't say a word as we got ready. The silence wasn't heavy, it was focused. It was the silence of soldiers checking their weapons before a battle. As we drove toward the Henderson estate, the city lights blurring past us, my mind drifted back. Thought about why. Why had they chosen Nicholas? Why had my parents looked at the man who left bruises on my arms and seen a son, while looking at me and seeing a problem? I remembered the night I came home with a black eye, stumbling into the kitchen begging for help. My mother had looked at me not with horror but with annoyance. She had told me I must have provoked him. She had told me Nicholas was under a lot of stress as a CEO, that I needed to be more understanding. Back then I thought they were blind. I thought if I just explained it better, if I just showed them the pain, they would wake up. But as I watched the familiar road wind toward the mansion, I finally let myself see the truth. They weren't blind. They were bought. To accept that Nicholas was a monster would mean accepting that they had sold their daughter for safety. It would mean facing the fact that their comfortable life, their status, their freedom was paid for with my pain. The human mind is a master of survival. When faced with a truth too ugly to bear, it rewrites reality. My parents didn't want to be monsters, so they made me the villain. In their version of the story, Laura is the problem. Nicholas is the provider. It was easier to sacrifice my sanity than their lifestyle. And that realization didn't make me sad anymore. It made me furious. It made my blood run hot and fast. I looked over at Julian, his hand resting on the gear shift, steady and calm. We weren't going to beg for a seat at their table tonight. We were going to foreclose on it. We pulled up to the iron gates of the Henderson estate, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of Julian's modest sedan. To anyone else, this place looked like a dream. The sprawling colonial mansion was bathed in warm, golden light, with tasteful wreaths in every window and a Christmas tree that soared 2 stories high in the foyer. The driveway was a parade of luxury SUVs and German sports cars, a testament to the family's supposed success. But as I looked at the pristine white columns, I didn't see a home. I saw a shell company. I saw a monument built on tax evasion and shadow loans, a beautiful facade hiding a rotting structure that was about to collapse. We walked up the steps, the cold winter air biting at my cheeks. I could hear the murmur of conversation and the soft clinking of crystal from inside. I didn't knock. I opened the door and stepped into the warmth. The conversation died instantly. It was like someone had cut the power. The string quartet in the corner actually stopped playing mid-measure. 50 heads turned. Cousins, business partners, neighbors, people who had spent years hearing stories about how unstable and difficult I was, stared at me like I was a ghost. My mother, Sarah, was the first to move. She didn't rush over to hug me. She marched toward us, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor, her face a mask of panicked fury. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin through my sleeve, and hissed in a voice low enough not to disturb the donors but loud enough to cut. "What are you doing here? We told you to stay away. And why did you bring him?" She cast a look of pure, unadulterated disdain at Julian. To her, in his off-the-rack suit and quiet demeanor, he was nothing. He was a stain on her perfect tapestry. She looked at him like he was the help, like he should have been using the service entrance. Before I could answer, the crowd parted. Nicholas emerged. He looked impeccable, I will give him that. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car, holding a glass of amber scotch in one hand. He walked with that easy, predatory grace of a man who has never been told no. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He walked right up to us, ignoring me completely, and stopped in front of Julian. You must be the driver, Nicholas said, his voice loud enough for the room to hear. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill and tucked it into Julian's breast pocket. Why don't you be a good lad and go move your car around back? You are blocking the view of the Porsches. My father, Gregory, walked up behind him and let out a bark of laughter. He clapped Nicholas on the shoulder, beaming at him with a pride he had never once shown me. You tell him, son, Gregory said. Good help is so hard to find these days. The room rippled with polite, cruel laughter. My sister Mara was smirking behind her champagne glass. I felt the heat rise in my chest, the old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to run away. But then I looked at Julian. He didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He looked at the $5 bill, then up at Nicholas and gave him a small, polite smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a sheep explain why it shouldn't be eaten. I will keep this safe, Julian said softly. My mother shooed us toward a corner table far away from the center of the room, treating us like an embarrassing stain she couldn't scrub out. She thought she was putting us in our place. She didn't realize she was locking herself in a cage with the only people who held the key. They thought they were royalty holding court. They didn't know they were already subjects in a kingdom that had been conquered yesterday morning. Dinner was served. Servers in white gloves moved like ghosts, placing plates of filet mignon in front of people who had sold their souls to pay for it. I didn't eat. I watched. I watched my father, Gregory, stand up and tap a silver spoon against his crystal wine glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the murmur of the room. The conversation died. He looked around, a king surveying a kingdom that was already burning. He just couldn't smell the smoke yet. He raised his glass to Nicholas. To the man of the hour, Gregory boomed, his voice thick with unearned pride. To Nicholas, the son I never had. He paused for the polite laughter that followed. It came obedient and hollow. Then his eyes found me in the back corner. They didn't hold love. They held a challenge. You know, he continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical hush, in this life, some children drain us. They take and take until there is nothing left. And others sustain us. They step up. They save us. We are blessed, truly blessed, to have Nicholas steering this ship. The applause was thunderous. Nicholas didn't look humble. He looked like a cat that had just swallowed a canary and was waiting for dessert. He leaned back, one arm draped over the back of his chair, basking in it. He smiled at my father, a conspiratorial grin that said we own this world. He thought he had won. He thought this public adoration was the final nail in my coffin. He thought I would shrink away, shamed by the comparison, crushed by the weight of their disapproval. But I wasn't shrinking. I was calculating. I remembered every time my father had compared us. Why can't you be more like Nicholas? Nicholas knows how to handle people. Nicholas is a leader. They had worshipped the hand that beat me because it also fed them. They had traded my safety for his silence. They broke me then, stripping away my voice piece by piece. But tonight I found it again, and it was sharper than steel. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. The sound cut through the applause like a gunshot. Heads turned. My mother's eyes widened in warning, her mouth forming a silent sit down. I didn't sit. I projected my voice to the back of the room. Is he the savior because he paid your bills, Dad? I asked. My tone was conversational, deadly calm. Or is he the savior because he knows about the tax fraud? The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of 100 people holding their breath at once. My father's face went from flush to pale in a heartbeat. The wine glass in his hand trembled, sending a ripple of red liquid dangerously close to the rim. Then the gaslighting started. It was almost impressive how fast they switched gears. It was a reflex, a defense mechanism honed over decades. My mother stood up, knocking her napkin to the floor. She is unstable. Sarah cried out, her voice shrill with panic. She turned to the guests, her hands fluttering, pleading for them to ignore me. This is why we didn't invite her. She is having an episode. She is imagining things. My sister Mara chimed in, sneering from across the room. God, Laura, you are embarrassing yourself. Sit down or get out. You're ruining everything. They were good at this. For years they had made me question my own reality. They had made me think the bruises were my fault, the insults were jokes, the neglect was love. But I wasn't buying their version of reality anymore. I was holding the receipts. Nicholas stood up. He didn't look amused anymore. The mask of the benevolent son slipped. revealing the predator underneath. He walked toward our table, his movements slow, deliberate. He was trying to intimidate me. He was trying to make me small. "You are making a scene, Laura," Nicholas said, his voice low, dangerous. He stopped a few feet away, looming over me, blocking the light. "Maybe you need another lesson in respect? Maybe you need to be reminded of your place?" He raised a hand. It was subtle, just a twitch, a shift in his shoulder, but I knew what it meant. I knew the weight of that hand. I knew the pain it promised. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't alone in the dark anymore. Nicholas snapped his fingers, a sharp, entitled sound that echoed in the silence. Two security guards, burly men in ill-fitting suits who had been hovering by the entrance, stepped forward. "Get them out," Nicholas ordered, not even looking at them, his eyes still fixed on me with that cold, dead stare. "And if she resists, drag her." That was the moment the air in the room changed. It wasn't me who moved. It was Julian. He didn't lunge. He didn't shout. He simply stepped between me and Nicholas. It was a fluid, practiced motion, like a door slamming shut on a draft. He reached into his jacket pocket, the same pocket Nicholas had stuffed the $5 bill into, and pulled out a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. He put them on. It was a small gesture, but the transformation was absolute. The quiet, submissive driver vanished. In his place stood a man who looked like he could buy and sell everyone in this room before breakfast. The security guard reached for my arm. Julian didn't look at him. He just held up one hand, palm out, without turning his head. "Touch her," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, smooth and heavy as lead, "and you will be facing assault charges before your next paycheck clears." Assuming, of course, that the checks don't bounce. The guard froze. Nicholas blinked, his sneer faltering for a fraction of a second. "Who do you think you are?" Nicholas spat. "You're the help. Know your place." "My place?" Julian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark in a tank full of goldfish. He opened the leather briefcase he had carried in unnoticed. He pulled out a single heavy cardstock business card and slid it across the white tablecloth. It stopped perfectly in front of Nicholas's scotch glass. "I am not her driver," Julian said, his enunciation crisp, cutting through the room. "I am Julian Vance, senior partner at Sterling & Vance. We specialize in high-risk corporate liquidation and distressed asset acquisition." A gasp rippled through the room. Even the cousins in the back knew that name. Sterling & Vance didn't handle traffic tickets. They dismantled corporations. Nicholas stared at the card, his face draining of color. "And right now," Julian continued, "I am acting as legal counsel for the sole lien holder of the property you are currently standing in." "Lien holder?" My father sputtered, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "What are you talking about?" "I own this house. I built this estate." "No, Dad," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file, the thick red folder I had carried with me like a shield. I threw it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud right next to the prime rib. "You don't own it. You hid it." I looked at the guests, raising my voice so every donor and neighbor could hear. "My parents set up a shell company, an LLC, to hide this mansion from the IRS. They thought they were clever. But to keep up this lifestyle, to keep buying the cars and throwing these parties, they needed cash. So they took out shadow loans. High interest. Predatory." I looked at Nicholas. Loans that he arranged for them. Nicholas looked like he was going to be sick. He knew exactly what was in that folder. "They defaulted 3 months ago," I said, my voice steady, cold. "The bank was about to foreclose quietly. They didn't want the scandal. So yesterday morning I made a call. I bought the promissory note. I bought the debt." "You can't do that," my mother whispered, her hands trembling. "You don't have that kind of money." "I do now," I said. "And because you signed a commercial loan agreement for your little tax shelter LLC, you agreed to a confession of judgment clause." I pointed to the document on top of the pile. "Do you know what that means, Gregory? It means you waived your right to a trial. It means that the second you missed a payment, the lender, me, could seize the assets without a judge, without a hearing, and without a warning." I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the wood, looking my father dead in the eye. "I own the debt. I own the LLC. And I own the chair you are sitting in." Nicholas laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a wet, ugly sound that bubbled up from his chest, breaking the tension in the room like a dropped plate. He shook his head, looking down at the file I had thrown, then back up at me with a pitying smirk. He wasn't beaten. He was just getting started. That is very clever, Laura, Nicholas said, picking up his scotch again. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. Buying the debt. Seizing the LLC. Very dramatic. But you forgot one thing. You forgot why your parents let me in the door in the first place. He reached into his tuxedo jacket. For a second the room flinched, expecting a weapon. But he just pulled out a flash drive. He held it up, letting it catch the light from the chandelier. Nicholas leaned in, his voice low but carrying. Evict us and I send this drive to the IRS, the DA, and every newsroom in the state. My mother sobbed. My father froze. Your parents didn't just hide the house, he continued. They hid millions in income, laundering, wire fraud, tax evasion. Mara signed the checks. If I fall, they all go to federal prison. He stepped closer. So call the police. Evict us. But no, you'll be the daughter who put her parents in chains. The room went silent. My parents looked at me, pleading. I smiled. I was counting on that. Nicholas frowned. I needed you to threaten me, out loud in front of witnesses. To admit you're extorting my family. I nodded to Julian. He produced a blue-bound document. Document 2, the last will and testament of Eleanor Henderson. My father stammered. She died broke. No, I said. She died smart. Julian read. A $5 million estate placed in a protective trust. It unlocks only upon irrefutable proof that Laura's immediate family conspired to extort or endanger her for financial gain. Nicholas went still. Grandma didn't leave me poor, I said. She left me a trap. I pointed to the blinking red light on Julian's lapel. We've been recording since we walked in. You just confessed to tax fraud and extortion. I stepped closer. You didn't checkmate me. You unlocked my inheritance. His face drained. Now I can fix the tax problem, I added. Or let you all rot. My mother rushed to me, desperate. We did it to protect the family. Now you have the money, we can fix this. I looked at her calmly. You didn't protect the family. You protected your comfort. You sold me for peace. I turned to security. I own the LLC that pays you. These people are trespassers. Remove them. Julian nodded. The guards moved. Nicholas lunged at me. Julian caught his wrist and dropped him to his knees. Get them out. No. They were dragged into the snow, dressed for a party that was over forever. Merry Christmas, I said and closed the door. The mansion fell silent, clean, empty. Julian exhaled. So, you own a mansion? No, I said, tossing my old photo into the fire. I own freedom. Later I opened my email. I already had copies of the records. Julian hesitated. You've won. You don't have to. Winning isn't escaping, I said. It's stopping them from doing this again. I hit send. Then we went home, to a small apartment warm with honest money. My inheritance wasn't $5 million. It was the ability to walk away and never look back. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, you understand.